Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Monstery Party Podcast Blu-ray commentary for Devil's Partner. I am Matt Weinhold.
I am Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Strothe.
And I'm James Gonis.
Right from the start, there's some nice horror movie atmosphere.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And as low-budget films go, I mean, this film wasn't shot over months. It was shot over very few days.
Right.
And I think under the circumstances, they did a really good job. I imagine watching this as a kid on Saturday night TV on Creature Features.
Exactly.
And it would creep me out.
Yeah. Also, I think when this film finally did come out in 1961, it must have made a nice alternative for audiences who didn't want to see another teenagers menaced by a monster kind of movie or another, giant insect film. I mean, this was a more serious approach to a horror film. It was just something different for the time. But most of the fare at the time was much more drive-in oriented, teenagers, and, just not something like this.
Yeah, like way more in the vein of Val Lewton.
Yeah. Even though that killing of the Gonis in shadow, it's still pretty effective.
Yes.
Especially for a movie filmed in 1958.
Yeah. Very unsettling.
Yeah, and also the amount of blood you see in general in the film is more than usual
Shocking,
for a 50s film.
I think it's an interesting choice using a hexagon instead of a magic circle or a pentagram.
Yeah. Maybe a pentagram would have been too on the nose.
Yeah, like too occulty
Possibly.
or
Yeah.
lurid. Censors would have had a problem with it.
It's interesting that this is also a pre-title sequence, which I don't think was too common back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Like throws you right in. It's like it really has you wondering what the heck is going on.
going on,
I mean,
right,
yeah, I like that.
Although I got to tell you, when I see scenes like this and I look at a chair or a bed frame in the shot, my mind always goes to, where is that now? Who has that? Is there somebody who brags like, I've got the bed frame from Devil's Partner?
Right.
I did think this was interesting, how he actually pricks himself with the quill to get his own blood to write his name in his own blood.
The devil will not accept goat blood. Then it's null and void.
If it's not your blood, it's no good.
Yeah.
And this is genuinely chilling.
Creepy, yeah.
Like that, you just don't expect that.
Doesn't Ed Nelson's old man makeup look like the classic Don Post mad scientist?
Oh, absolutely, it does. It really does.
Although, I will say the first time I saw this, I didn't realize that was not an actual old man.
Decent makeup for its time, I think.
What's also his posture and his moving.
Yeah, he does a pretty good job playing the two different characters.
Excellent horror font.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah. Globs of paint to give it that 3D look. There's a bit of a plot spoiler with Ed Nelson's credits because he's credited as Pete Jensen and Nick Richards. So
True.
They give it away.
Not only that, he is presented in the film as introducing Ed Nelson, but in reality, he had been in several films already. What's interesting, though, is that all the promotional material for the film, like in the posters and lobby cards, the title of the film is The Devil's Partner.
That's right.
But on the film itself, it's just Devil's Partner.
Devil's Partner.
Now, let me get this straight. Old Pete Jensen makes a deal with Satan, dies, comes back as Nick Richards, and then Nick Richards goes to another state and takes a Greyhound bus back to Furnace Flats. Now, that's dedication.
Yeah, really.
He wanted to see the country, get around a little bit.
Well, and when you see Furnace Flats, I mean, why would you leave?
Well, Furnace Flats, I suppose that's a bit of a joke on, the people are going to be going through hell. It's hot. Maybe something there. I don't know. And population 1,505? I think we only see, 8, 10 people tops?
Right.
There is a Furnace Flats area in the Grand Canyon. It's in the first stretch of the Escalante route along the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. But with all the mentions of Albuquerque in this film, you'd think that this takes place in New Mexico. But New Mexico does not have a city called Furnace Flats. So much for realism. The guy putting the coin here in the jukebox is Riley Hill, but his real name was Roy Lawrence Harris. Besides making his brief appearance in Charles Rondeau's Devil's Partner, Hill also played a uniformed cop in Rondeau's crime drama, The Threat. Joe Hooker plays Deputy Joe, who you see throughout the film. He was in one long-lost early Western television series in 1951 called The Buckskin Rangers, but he's just as invisible in that film as he is here in Devil's Partner.
Well, it all depends.
Ooh, and here's the villain of our piece, Nick Richards, played by Ed Nelson. More on him later.
A lot more.
I love that at the mention of Pete Jensen, you get that classic suspicious townfolk take.
Devil's Partner was shot in September and October of 1958. Location footage was filmed in and around Los Angeles, which stood in for the movie's small-town setting of Furnace Flats. Studio filming and interiors were done at Kling Studios, which was originally built and owned by Charlie Chaplin and once called Chaplin Studios. Later, the studio went through various owners, including Red Skelton, who shot its TV show there. The George Reeves Adventures of Superman TV series was also shot at the studio. In 2000, the property was purchased by Jim Henson's family, and it's now the production location for the Jim Henson Company.
Cops are great.
You're under arrest for not being from around here.
He just asked him to come to the office.
Yeah.
No harm done.
This is like the devil movie version of In the Heat of the Night.
Sheriff Tom Fuller, played by Spencer Carlisle. It's a very reassuring presence in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of surprising he didn't work more. He only did a few things. He did a couple of episodes of television, Death Valley Days in 1959, and Lawman a year later. He was also in The Girl in Lover's Lane in 1960. Now, in 1958, he bought a mansion in Sherman Oaks, California.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That had belonged to Liberace.
Wow. Jeez.
And so many tourists stopped by his house, he had to put up a big sign saying, Liberace does not live here anymore, has moved to Palm Springs.
Wow.
That's why he didn't work as an actor. He was rich.
Yeah, evidently. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote me a letter a short while
Dang,
ago.
it's hot.
To get over as quick as I could.
Yes. You really feel the heat.
There's a lot of sweating
I was
in
going to
this
say,
film.
I think the filmmakers really did a good job of creating that hot, humid atmosphere. And I love the touch of, Nick Richards just not breaking a sweat at all.
Yeah.
It's a great touch.
Perfect hair.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was also back in the time where no matter what the temperature was, gentlemen walked around with jackets and ties.
Right.
That's true.
It was a different time.
Goat in the shack with its throat cut.
I do think this film does an excellent job of creating an unsettling atmosphere. It's a slow burn that keeps up the tension. And Ed Nelson's nice guy, weird guy thing is wonderful.
He really pulls it off.
Yeah, it keeps you guessing all throughout the movie.
I think if he didn't make that role work, the whole film probably wouldn't have worked.
Yes, yes. Pete looked like he saw something horrible when he died. But he just saw Satan, and he loves Satan.
Anything that anyone knew of.
I love, though, how Nick Richards is basically like playing with everybody in the town.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing dumb, but he kind of knows what's going on. So it's insidious. The Jezer Hora name, which I guess is the name of the demon, the name seems to have simply been made up. If you research the two words, Jezer is also a nickname for Jeremy or Jeff, and Hora is also the name of a dance originating in Romanian culture, which became a traditional dance in Jewish weddings. So perhaps the two words together as a supernatural name just sounded menacing to the writers.
So wait a minute. The devil prefers to be called Jeff?
Jeff Dancer?
I like that.
Edgar Buchanan plays the role of Dr. Don Lucas. Born in 1903, hailing from Humansville, Missouri, in 1928, Buchanan got a DDS degree from the North Pacific College School of Dentistry. He met his wife Mildred in dental school, and they married in 1928. Let me check your teeth,
That line never works for me.
No. Well, after he appeared in his first film, My Son is Guilty, in 1939, at the age of 36, he turned his practice over to his wife.
Wow.
Buchanan appeared in over 100 films, and in A Case of Art Imitating Life, he played a dentist in the 1941 film Texas, and from the 40s through the 70s, just kept going. He appeared in the films Penny Serenade, The Talk of the Town, The Man from Colorado, Cheaper by the Dozen, Shane, Ride the High Country, McClintock, and one of my favorite films, Benji.
Aww.
Of course, like most actors, Buchanan's got a long list of TV credits, including The Rifleman, Leave It to Beaver, The Twilight Zone, Thriller, The Mod Squad, The Partridge Family, and Love American Style. Now, although Buchanan was either a regular or recurring cast member in shows like Hopalong Cassidy, Tales from Wells Fargo, and the crime drama Cade's Country, he's arguably best known for his role as Uncle Joe Carson in the Beverly Hillbilly spin-off Petticoat Junction.
Oh, yeah.
Buchanan would not only appear in all 222 episodes of Petticoat Junction, which, by the way, he was the only actor to do so, but he also played Joe in 17 episodes of Green Acres and 3 episodes of the Beverly Hillbillies.
Wow. And if you're looking for a truly legendary piece of Buchanan's work on vinyl, look no further than the Dot Records release, Phantom 309. This song was originally written by Tommy Fail, and singer Red Sovine made it a modest hit in 1967. The single features lyrics that are spoken instead of sung and are accompanied by light country western music. Over the years, many artists have covered this song, including Dave Dudley, Boxcar Willie, and Tom Waits. But, in our opinion, the definitive version of Phantom 309 was by Edgar Buchanan, also in 1967.
In Phantom 309, Buchanan portrays a down-on-his-luck hitchhiker telling a tale about getting picked up by an enigmatic truck driver named Big Joe in his truck, the Phantom 309. Big Joe eventually drops the hitchhiker off at a diner and even gives him a dime for coffee. But when the hitchhiker tells the waiter about his ride with Big Joe, he is told that Joe had died 10 years ago in an accident at the same intersection where he was picked up.
Now, if this story sounds familiar, that's because it was an inspiration for Large Marge, the ghost driver in the 1985 film Pee-wee's Big Adventure. How about that?
Love
huh?
that film. Yeah, it's awesome.
Unfortunately for the world, on April 4th, 1979, Edgar Buchanan died from a stroke at the age of 76. Some folks say he still haunts the Denny's near his Palm Desert, California home, searching for folks who will buy him a cup of ghost coffee. And by some folks, I really mean just me. Our film's heroine, Nell Lucas, is played by Jean Allison. Born in New York on October 24th, 1929, Allison had a very successful career as an actress. She cut her teeth on the New York stage and studied under the renowned acting teacher Sanford Meisner. According to the Devil's Partner press book, she became an instant success through her leading roles in such plays Time of the Cuckoo with Shirley Booth, TV's Hazel, and Mary Astor and the Broadway production of All Summer Long. Allison worked on a handful of films from the 50s through the 70s, and although the press book tells us that Allison makes her feature film debut in The Devil's Partner, prior to that, she did appear in the 1958 film Edge of Fury, which is a pretty grisly movie for the time, but does feature some early work from legendary cinematographer Conrad Hall. Later in the 70s, Jean Allison could be seen in the comedy The Steagle with Richard Benjamin and Cloris Leachman, the western Bad Company with Jeff Bridges, and the controversial George C. Scott drama Hardcore.
Shut it off!
Turn it off.
Oh my God, that's my daughter.
That's my daughter!
But it was working in television that Jean Allison made the biggest impact. Allison lent her talents to many popular shows from the 50s through the 80s, like Have Gun Will Travel, Maverick, a couple episodes of One Step Beyond, a favorite show of mine, Bonanza, The Dick Van Dyke Show, Bewitched, Emergency, The Bionic Woman, and Starsky and Hutch. Jean Allison's personal life took some interesting turns. Her first marriage was to actor and director Lee Phillips, best known for his performance in the 1957 film of Peyton Place. Phillips had a long career directing television shows and TV movies like Diagnosis Murder, Barnum, and Samson and Delilah.
Later, after Allison and Philip split up, she married FX Toole, who would go on to write the story that became the 2004 Clint Eastwood film, $1 Million Baby. Unfortunately, this marriage ended as well, but Allison would eventually find the love of her life in a Stanford electrical engineering student named Phil Torvald. Years later, after Phil passed away, Allison reconnected with Edge of Fury cameraman Jack Kofer, who was nominated for an Oscar for the 1974 film Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and they were an item until his death in 2021. As of this recording, Gene Allison is still with us at the ripe old age of 93.
I think I'll have
This, I believe, is all the exteriors at Kling Studios in Hollywood.
Say,
When did the finger under the chin go out of style? I know it had to be before the Me Too movement.
pretty much filled, you know.
Yeah, again, the story unfolds kind of cleverly. It makes you kind of you have to pay attention, to really see his plot unfolding.
The prop master on this film was Robert Eaton, who first started his career in 1952 with Buona Devil, all the way up to Valdez is Coming in 1971. In between, he handled the props for several movies, including In Cold Blood, Lilies of the Field, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and Paint Your Wagon.
Maybe he owns that bed frame.
Milk already.
No,
And the goats are still there.
I'm on my way now. I thought if
Well,
you weren't
that's
busy, you might like to
They call that a cash goat.
over at Harry Matthews' house.
The costumes for this film were by Richard Chaney, who was born in 1908 in Colorado. His first movie was A Guy Named Joe in 1943, but he was uncredited. That was followed a year later by the World War II film The Bold and the Brave with Wendell Corey. Some of his films after that include the Tony Curtis car racing movie Johnny Dark and the Jeff Chandler Civil War film Drango. 1 year before production on Devil's Partner, he was responsible for the costumes in Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Nice.
Devil's Partner was actually his last credit. He died in Kern County, California in 1971.
Harry Matthews' house looks almost as bad as Nick's shack.
Yeah, really.
No wonder he's sick.
It's these bachelors.
TB suffering goat milk enthusiast Harry Matthews is played by character actor Brian O'Hara. Although not much is known about O'Hara, he does have a very long list of credited and uncredited roles in various films from the 40s through the 60s. Some of the movies O'Hara appeared in are California Joe, Chain for Life, The Big Combo, Married Too Young, and the Three Stooges short, Three Pests and a Mess. And I think we can all agree he does a very nice job with this small role.
He does.
Yeah. It's one of the few films where goat milk plays an important role.
Yeah, really.
Yes.
Part of a small subgenre
Yeah.
of goat
Yeah.
milk films.
Yeah.
I think I had read one review of the film which said this was the most goaty horror film ever made.
Well, thanks again for bringing the...
Even though Devil's Partner was an obscure film, it did receive some positive reviews in some books.
Yes.
In Twice the Thrills, Twice the Chills, horror and science fiction double features from 1955 to 1974 by Brian Sen, the review goes on to say, though small scale and refreshingly non-scientific given the atomic obsessed times, the rather eerie and well-acted Devil's Partner actually proves superior to its better-known co-feature, Creature from the Haunted Sea. Director Charles Rondeau delivers an atmospheric, intimate little supernatural thriller. Though perhaps predictable, the various earnest, likable players, including Nelson, Gene Allison, and Edgar Buchanan, make it a painless 70-minute time killer. While it's never going to drive such superior satanic fare like The Seventh Victim, Rosemary's Baby, or even The Devil's Reign from one's mind, you could do far worse than to shake hands with the Devil's Partner.
Never any indication of any kind of a weak heart.
Here's another review published in The Satanic Screen, an illustrated guide to the devil in cinema, where Nicholas Schreck says, a diverting, if modest B-picture essay in black magic. The rural setting of Devil's Partner is an interesting departure from the usual urban or gothic environment in which most satanic films are situated. Some new wrinkles are also wrought by dramatizing the ancient folklore of the devil's influence over animals, here presented as his malefic familiars.
Come up with something more professional.
The quiet, small town vibe created in this movie makes me think of this kind of as Satan comes to Mayberry. You know,
Yeah.
if only Sheriff Andy Taylor was on the case, less people would have died.
Even Barney, although Barney would have been probably the first one to go.
Right.
That's the lab report from Albuquerque.
And look, I'm sure we're not saying the film is a masterpiece, but for what these guys had, it's not a bad low-budget film.
No.
Not at all. Edgar Buchanan always struck me as a very natural actor.
Oh, yeah.
You really believe him. He comes across very naturally. He just completely immerses into his characters.
Yeah. Throws it away.
I don't know about you, but that's like a headshot, professional headshot of him and the dog.
Yes, you're right.
Well, yeah, well, where did Pete Jensen get the photo?
Where did he get it? And then why did David even take that photo? Like, you know what? I need a headshot for me and my dog.
It's like we do parties, we do performances. And...
Yeah. Sounds like a theremin. Is that Shawn Sheridan's shack?
If you notice in the beginning of the film, that painting on the wall right there was of a kind of creepy portrait of a woman, and now it's been changed to a landscape. So he did a little redecorating, obviously.
I think it's because that woman sued.
Also, you would think that he would be saying some kind of satanic curse or something, but he doesn't. All he does is he uses his eyes and his face.
Yeah.
The sound recordist on Devil's Partner was George Anderson, and this was his second gig after the Buster Crabbe Western Gun Brothers in 1956. Now, IMDb credits him as doing the sound for Die Hard and Christmas Vacation after a 20-year hiatus. But this is a case where IMDb is apparently in error. He may very well have recorded sound for just 2 movies.
The whole small scale of the film reminds me a little bit of like a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
It could have worked. It's kind of an extended Twilight Zone episode, but in a good way. I mean, it just plays like that.
What's wrong with you?
I would also say that the filmmakers take the subject seriously.
Yes.
They're not, sending up things. They're not making fun of the subject. They're playing it all straight, which I like.
Yeah.
France, it's me!
This is actually an effective scene.
No, you're right, Sean. That is an excellent dog attack. And I don't think it's a fake dog, really, in any of the shots.
No,
I think that's the real dog.
That's
Yeah.
a stunt double there.
Yeah.
But it's effective.
But is it a live dog?
It is a live dog.
Yeah.
But no dogs were injured in this scene.
Okay.
Would you believe that most dog bites in the United States are caused by German shepherds?
Really?
That's a wingback armchair, by the way. Very popular in the 1950s. I'm just giving you information.
I love it. I love it.
What about the lamp?
David, are you there?
Where's that lamp?
Straight.
Where's that ashtray?
I didn't think you guys wanted all of that stuff. The chair was very prominent in the shot.
But where is it now? Who has it?
It's something I'd like to know.
So this is our first glimpse of Nick actually doing something evil. So now we kind of getting the idea of what's happening. And that's, again, a pretty bloody film for 1958. I'm surprised this passed censors because, look at him. That's pretty gruesome.
And normally that type of thing only happens with pet chimps.
Devil's Partner was not registered with the Copyright Office when it was made, which is why so many crappy versions of the movie have been available, because it's technically still in the public domain. Devil's Partner was also reissued at some point under the title Enter the Devil. Coincidentally, another devil worship-themed horror film called Enter the Devil was released in 1972. It also takes place in a hot, isolated rural setting, this time in southern Texas. The plot involves a cult of Satan worshippers capturing victims passing through a desert town and sacrificing them in a subterranean cave lair. There are also two different silent films from the 1920s titled The Devil's Partner, an adventure drama involving smugglers from 1923 and a Western from 1926. Our regular Joe gas station owner and operator is played by the athletic, square-jawed cowboy, police officer, space ranger, veteran television actor Richard Crane. Crane was a hard-working, blue-collar actor who had over 135 credits to his name. Perhaps the biggest role Crane played on television was that of outer space hero Rocky Jones, Space Ranger, for a couple of seasons starting in 1954. Along with Sally Mansfield as Vina Ray and Robert Lydon as Bobby, this space opera series would follow the team flying in their orbit jet throughout the galaxy, battling no-good evil villains. Apparently, when Crane signed his contract, which was for 7 years, it stipulated that he could never appear in public without his Space Ranger uniform. In fact, Crane had such an ironclad contract that his boss was quoted in the LA Times saying, "In fact, Crane will even sleep in his Space Ranger pajamas." The contract also required that Crane make at least 60 advertised public appearances in cities all across the country. Now that's some pretty heavy promotion.
At this point in his career, Richard Crane was resigned to the fact that he would never really become a big-time movie star. In fact, when he signed that contract in 1952, he was quoted as saying, "If I were going to be a star, I'd have made it by now." Okay, Richard Crane never became a household name, but he did do some great work, as we can see in Devil's Partner.
Absolutely. Some of Crane's other notable genre credits include The Alligator People with Lon Chaney Jr., The Mysterious Island Serial from the 50s, The Flying Serpent, The Neanderthal Man, and House of the Damned.
Crane did a lot of work in television. He did Commando Cody TV series in 1955, and in the 60s, he appeared in Honey West, Dragnet 1967, Lassie, and he was in 32 episodes of Surfside 6, playing series regular Lieutenant Gene Plen. He worked steadily throughout his career, and he could have worked into the 70s, but tragically he died young of a heart attack at the age of 50 in March 1969. This is actually one of my favorite scenes in the film because it's so leisurely.
Yeah.
And it's one take at a minute and a half.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I don't think there's a longer take in this whole movie.
Much do I owe you?
And they're both so very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, two great character actors just working off each other.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Paper.
Brian Folger is a great town drunk. He's not too over the top,
No.
not doing any kind of Otis from Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
No, he actually plays it pretty sympathetically.
Yeah.
The owner of Ida's Cafe is Claire Carleton. Claire had over 180 credits to her name in both feature films and TV, but she also had a well-established stage career. Although she could play a glamorous woman, producers preferred to have her play many of those tough, wisecracking, bleach blonde characters in supporting roles, many of which were either the other woman or some cheap tart or showgirl. Despite being great at playing quote-unquote cheap, Claire also had a great sense of humor and enjoyed doing slapstick.
You never hear about an expensive tart.
Yeah, why is it? Can you be an expensive tart too?
The 1940s were a very busy time for Claire. She had a couple of leading roles in the early 40s in Girl from Havana and Gildersleeve on Broadway. On the later part of the decade, she had smaller roles in movies like A Double Life, Two Nuts in a Rut, and The Senator Was Indiscreet.
In 1947, Claire played the part of Kitty in the Three Stooges short Fright Night. In that short, the Stooges attempt to train their star boxer, and they use Kitty to get him riled up and fight like a champ. Using her good looks and distinct high-pitched voice, Claire plays a very funny ditzy blonde. By the 50s and 60s, Claire worked primarily in television, and some of her shows included Father Knows Best, Lassie, Boris Karloff's Thriller, favorite of mine, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Munsters, and 8 episodes of Wagon Train.
As for feature films, besides doing Devil's Partner in 1958, Claire was also in a Monster Party favorite, The Black Sleep, with horror legends Basil Rathbone, John Carradine, Lon Chaney Jr., Tor Johnson, and Bela Lugosi. Sadly, in 1961, Claire's husband, Fred Sherman, who is also an actor, had finished filming an episode of The Andy Griffith Show when he suffered a massive stroke, which confined him to a hospital bed where he stayed for 8 years. When Fred passed away in 1969, Claire retired from doing films and television. She passed away 10 years later in December of 1979 at the age of 66, but she left behind a ton of wonderful performances.
The lead in Devil's Partner is actor Ed Nelson. Now, for anyone into cinema and Hollywood, Nelson should be a pretty familiar face. He was a prolific actor on stage, TV, and film. He's best known for his recurring role as Dr. Michael Rossi on the popular 60s primetime soap opera Peyton Place. Nelson was a New Orleans native and got the acting bug while attending Tulane University. After serving as a radio man in the U.S. Navy, he moved to Los Angeles in the 50s to pursue an acting career full-time. For horror and sci-fi fans, Nelson is probably best known for his appearance in several low-budget Roger Corman films. And in fact, Nelson got one of his first jobs from Corman. When Roger was in Louisiana filming his crime thriller Swamp Women in 1955 with Beverly Garland and Mike Connors, Nelson applied for a job on the production as a gopher. When interviewed about his experiences working with Corman, Nelson said, and here I am doing my best Ed Nelson impression, "Roger helped me out a great deal in those early days. He's every bit as cheap as everybody says he is. That's what he calls frugal. I did a lot of work for him for free so that I could get parts in his pictures, just like Jonathan Hayes and Dick Miller and all the rest of them. He used us and we used him, but it was no more than that. It hardly ever got personal."
Nelson helped out on the set of Swamp Women, and of course, this being a Roger Corman production, Nelson did everything from supplying coffee to the cast and crew to holding a real live alligator for one scene, as Mike Connors pretended to stab it with a fake knife. Nelson even got a bit part as a police sergeant in the movie. Later, after Nelson had moved to Los Angeles, Corman remembered him and ended up casting him in many of his low-budget horror and sci-fi films. These included Attack of the Crab Monsters, The Brain Eaters, which Nelson also got a producer credit on, Teenage Caveman, Night of the Blood Beast, and A Bucket of Blood. On Attack of the Crab Monsters, Ed had a small role as a Navy lieutenant, and he actually played the part of the main crab monster.
Nice.
I'm so jealous.
What can he do?
I know.
There was a book written about Ed Nelson's career called Beyond Peyton Place, My 50 Years on Stage, Screen, and Television. And in it, Nelson has some fun stories about working on Roger Corman movies. For instance, on Attack of the Crab Monsters, and this is my Ed Nelson imitation.
Go.
Actress Pamela Duncan played the photographer for the group of scientists in the film. In one close-up scene in the movie, she shows them her photo of the crab, and you can see my feet in tennis shoes sticking out of the bottom of the crab. On a massive movie screen, each foot appeared to be about 6 feet wide.
Friend, I'd do anything.
That was very Gonis-y.
On Teenage Caveman, he said, "My role was as a bad caveman member of the tribe. My blonde cave dweller wig looked as if it had cost $5 and belonged on a female mannequin in a store window. They had to practically nail it on my head."
As far as Nelson's experience on Devil's Partner, when interviewed by film historian Tom Weaver for his book Attack of the Monster Movie Makers, Ed talked a little bit about director Charles Rondeau, saying he was, quote, "a big guy, pretty much a bullshitter, but we got along fine." And regarding his transformation between old hermit Pete Jensen to the young Nick Richards, he said, "I remember them shooting the transformation effects from old to young. I had to hold my head still while they took off some makeup, shot a few frames, took some more makeup off, a la Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, lap dissolves. The makeup didn't take that long to put on, an hour, maybe 2. Nelson said the film was shot out in the San Fernando Valley somewhere out in the sticks. And in his biography, Nelson refers to Devil's Partner as my less than Academy Award winning movie. He goes on to say, "In the reviews, I am credited with my first appearance, and it was actually at least my 8th. I do a little black magic, causing a dog and a horse to attack people. The plot is ridiculous, and is supposed to be based on Goethe's Faust. But all in all, not bad for a Class B picture. Edgar Buchanan was in it and was great to work with. His approach to acting was the same as Spencer Tracy's. Say the words and don't bump into the furniture."
And just to show how busy of an actor Ed Nelson was, here are just some of his other credits: Invasion of the Saucermen, The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, The Fugitive, the creepy 70s TV movie The Screaming Woman,
Oh, yeah.
Night Gallery, The Bionic Woman, Dallas, and Dynasty. And in one of his later roles, a great overlooked monster movie from 1991 called The Boneyard, which also starred Phyllis Diller.
That's a good one.
On stage, Nelson played President Harry S. Truman for the national tour of the stage play Give 'em Hell, Harry. He performed in the play for several years, taking over the role from James Whitmore, who was originally cast in the show. During his career, Nelson was an active member of the Screen Actors Guild, as well as a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He continued working steadily in films and television throughout his later years. His last acting credit was in 2005, and he passed away in 2014 from heart failure at 85.
Don't mind.
I'll see you in the morning then.
So long, Nick.
Okay, about the poster.
Oh, boy.
In classic Roger Corman tradition of promising way more in a film's poster than what actually takes place in the movie, Film Group's striking poster for Devil's Partner features a naked blonde woman wielding a torch as she rides a demonic-looking centaur. A tombstone nearby reads, "We do not recommend this picture for those who are easily shocked." And lingering above the woman and centaur is the outline of the devil's face, looking down on them with sinister approval. And you know, it's just so front and centaur.
Nice.
See, I want to see that movie. I want to see
really,
the movie
where-
that's depicted on the poster.
Fan fiction.
The sweetest, gentlest man this side of heaven. That's what I can see. Only what's come over you?
Now, David really is very, very cold to Nell. I mean, yeah, he's disturbed about a number of things.
Yeah.
But it's still a bit much. I mean, if, as she says, if he was ever the sweetest, gentlest man this side of heaven, I don't know if he'd be behaving quite this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you'd feel differently if you were scraped, and mangled by your dog.
And then had to
lost
kill
your
your dog.
dog.
Right, right.
Not this bad.
Well, David suspects there's a centaur in the hen house, so a little on edge.
Isn't that it?
Well, I don't understand.
Richard Crane had other disfigurement issues, of course, in The Alligator People.
Yeah, he can't get a break.
Right. Scales for that one.
Well, I can see he's becoming quite a...
You know, it's a good thing she's right-handed, because a left-handed slap...
Absolutely.
It's like, of all the places to slap him, not in the face.
Yeah, really. Insult to injury.
I mean, never mind the fact that David had to kill his own dog.
Right.
I mean, more than the disfigurement, that would have...
Oh, my gosh.
that would have disturbed me to no end.
Absolutely.
It's funny, but in the 1950s, there were not too many films featuring the devil or devil worshippers. I mean, you had the 1957 film The Undead, directed by Roger Corman, about a prostitute who goes through hypnosis and is regressed back to a previous life where Satan makes a cameo. And also in 57 was Night of the Demon, a.k.a. Curse of the Demon, based on the M.R. James story The Casting of the Runes. It's a classic of the genre, featuring a wonderful Aleister Crowley-type sorcerer and a brilliant animatronic demon head.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
But when the 1960s hit, satanic cinema took off.
That's for sure. In the 1960s, we got films like The City of the Dead, a.k.a. Horror Hotel, where an entire town is taken over by devil worshippers. Night of the Eagle, a.k.a. Burn Witch Burn, based on the Fritz Leiber book Conjure Wife. We had the Roger Corman films Haunted Palace and The Mask of Red Death, both with Vincent Price. Witchcraft, starring Lon Chaney Jr., the Hammer films The Witches, a.k.a. The Devil's Own, about a school teacher plagued by Satanists. Eye of the Devil with David Niven, Donald Pleasance, David Hemmings, Sharon Tate, Deborah Carr, and, of course, Satan.
And they just keep on coming.
Yep.
You had the all-Esperanto language film Incubus, a production that featured Outer Limits veterans Leslie Stevens, Conrad Hall, and Dominic Frontier, starring William Shatner.
That's right.
That's
Shatner
right.
doing Esperanto.
A must-see is the trippy and beautiful witch film from the USSR, Vi.
Yeah.
Another Hammer classic, The Devil Rides Out, a.k.a. The Devil's Bride, based on the novel by Dennis Wheatley. You get a goat-headed Satan and a giant spider in this one.
That's right.
A lot of bang for your buck.
There's some entertaining Christopher Lee, Boris Karloff, Barbara Steele schlock in Curse of the Crimson Altar, a.k.a. The Crimson Cult.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, there's the Michael Reeves masterpiece, Witchfinder General, starring Vincent Price, where, for once, the witch hunters are the real evil.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And the small screen started getting in on the demonic act in a serious way with the TV film Fear No Evil, featuring Louis Jourdan as an occult expert who battles satanic entities. Jourdan would return to play the same character in Ritual of Evil in 1970, and both films were unsold pilots for a series that was supposed to be called Bedeviled.
Yeah, that would have been a good series, too. These films are good.
Yeah, that's a shame that they never made that.
But of course, the true red horn cherry atop this hellish sundae is Roman Polanski's production of the Ira Levin novel Rosemary's Baby.
Oh.
Yeah.
If that doesn't stop you from wanting to have kids, nothing will. And I'm sure we missed someone's favorite, but we only have so much time.
That's true.
So there's an actual location shot at night, and it dissolves into a pretty good day for night scene, but the headlights aren't on. Would have been a little more convincing if they kept the headlights on.
They do a lot of really good day for night in this movie.
They do?
Yeah,
I noticed that.
What are you doing here, Papers?
I wasn't doing nothing honest.
The town drunk is played by famed character actor Byron Folger. Over the course of Folger's 50 years in show business, he did just about everything, raking up over 480 credits in both feature films and television. Folger's film career started in the early 1930s when he and his wife Dorothy Adams, who was also a character actor, moved to Hollywood to make it in the movies. They had some moderate success, but it wasn't until Byron's performance on the NBC radio show The Chase and Sanborn Hour in 1937 with famed comedian, movie star, and sex symbol Mae West that really got him noticed. The racy comedy sketch was written by Arch Obler as a parody of the biblical story of The Garden of Eden, starring Don Amici and Mae West. Byron Folger played Mr. Snake, who relished in saying, "forbidden fruit." Apparently, the double entendres in the dialogue were considered to be so scandalous that days after the broadcast, NBC received over 1,000 letters from people calling the show immoral and obscene. By today's standards, it was all pretty tame, but NBC was horrified at the time and banned Mae West from ever being on one of their radio programs until 1950.
Wow.
Fortunately for Folger, everybody loved Mr. Snake, which gave Folger a ton of attention. And from that moment on, Folger worked continuously in films and television until the end of his career. Although he was never nominated for an Oscar, Byron Folger was in 5 films that were nominated for Best Picture. They include Test Pilot, You Can't Take It With You, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, The Human Comedy, and Since You Went Away.
Just some of Folger's many genre films include The Man They Could Not Hang, Beware Spooks, Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe, Man-Made Monster, Mighty Joe Young, House of Horrors, Superman and the Mole Men, and Son of Flubber.
Some of Folger's many TV credits include Dick Tracy, Space Patrol, I Love Lucy, The Lone Ranger, The Wild Wild West, The Mod Squad, and over 20 episodes of Petticoat Junction with fellow Devil's Partner castmate Edgar Buchanan.
Now, Byron Folger may have played hundreds of meek, mild-mannered characters in the movies, but he was not like that in real life. There's a story that he and his wife were invited to a big Hollywood party where they had a run-in with legendary film star Errol Flynn. At the time, Flynn had developed quite a reputation for his hard drinking and womanizing. So it was no surprise when Flynn tried to engage in some very heavy, unwanted flirting with Folger's wife, Dorothy. And this caused Folger to take matters into his own hands. He went up to Flynn and threatened to punch his lights out if he didn't knock it off. Flynn must have been so surprised by Folger's outburst that he left them alone. Hey, Folger's not going to let anyone make a pass at his wife.
No. Folger and Nelson are just fantastic in this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, great silhouette of Nick killing the goat with a knife.
The lighting is fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to give this guy an award. I really do. He's just so good.
There is a life behind those eyes. It's not typical for a drunk.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a sadness, you know?
Yeah.
He really...
A tragedy.
Yeah.
You really see on his face and in his eyes the tortured path that his life took.
Yep.
His face is the picture of misery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the music here is punctuating every time he puts the goat's blood down on the hexagram, and that's an instance of Mickey Mousing when the music does that.
I think by now, Papers realizes that this is not going to turn out well for him. I'll tell you, a demonic goat sacrifice will sober you up pretty quickly.
I give The Devil's Partner credit for depicting Satanism and the rituals of devil worshipping as very matter-of-fact and realistic. You know, there's no like weird optical effects or no, you know, strange sounds. It's just this
hexagon.
Yeah. It's just, but it's something like anybody could have done. You know, like you could do it. Like it's not done in a overly showy, over-the-top way.
So, are you saying that this film is saying, try this at home?
Well, no.
Yeah, it's just a lot lower key than you would expect.
Right.
Right.
I like also how the way Ed Nelson performs when he's doing any kind of like magic is it takes a lot out of him.
Yeah.
You know, it takes some energy from him each time he does it. It's some pretty good lap dissolve effect here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the score was composed by Ronald Stein. And Stein was a native of St. Louis, where he attended Washington University. He wanted to study music at Yale, but he got drafted, and he ended up writing and conducting shows for the military. Stein went to Hollywood in the 50s, and he was rejected by every major studio he tried to write film scores for. Finally, Roger Corman gave him a break, as he'd done with so many filmmakers.
Of course.
Yeah.
And he scored Corman's Apache Woman in 1955.
Nice.
Many of his best-known scores after that included It Conquered the World, Attack of the Crab Monsters, Invasion of the Saucermen, Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, Spider Baby, and Dementia 13. Apparently, Francis Ford Coppola liked his work enough to hire him to score The Rain People in 1969.
Nice.
And a year later, he scored the Elliott Gould movie Straight Time for Richard Rush. He wrote the music for a song in Straight Time called Pigs Go Home, which was sampled by Eminem for his song Guilty Conscience in 1999.
Wow.
Stein died in Los Angeles in 1988, but he's been immortalized not only in rap, but of course in his memorable score for Devil's Partner. I think it's one of the best things in this movie.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think it's
good.
amazing.
And I love the theremin usage.
Yeah, me too.
It's just, it fits so perfectly for this movie.
3 cues from Devil's Partner were included in the 1995 Varesis Saraband compilation, Not of This Earth, the film music of Ronald Stein. And in 2007, the entire score was included in the deluxe 5-disc box set, Mad, Maud, and Macabre, the Ronald Stein Collection, by Percepto Records, which was limited to 1,000 copies. The names of some of the tracks include Poison Goat's Milk Kills the Old Man and The Horse Tramples Papers.
Oh, too soon.
Again, a pretty effective animal attack scene with the editing.
Yes.
All these demonic animal killings are also prefiguring the Omen series.
That's right.
Now, I would have put a color scene here where Nick tramples papers in the form of a pink elephant. Right? It's right there. Devil's Partner was independently produced by a man named Hugh Hooker. Hooker started out as a Hollywood stuntman in the 40s and 50s, appearing in numerous westerns and action films. He also had small acting roles at the time and was often uncredited for his work. He worked well into the 70s and 80s, doing stunts in notable movies such as Empire of the Ants, Corvette Summer, The Incredible Shrinking Woman, The Hand, and Scarface. Hugh Hooker was also the original owner of a horse named White Cloud, the horse that would eventually be handpicked by actor Clayton Moore to become his horse Silver on the Lone Ranger TV series.
Oh, it's so cool.
Hi-yo, White Cloud.
In the late 1950s, Hooker went into movie producing. His first film as a producer was called The Littlest Hobo, which was released by Allied Artists in 1958. It was a family adventure about a very smart German shepherd named London who stows away on a freight train and ends up in L.A. The dog rescues a lamb named Fleecy from being killed in a slaughterhouse, and the two animals have various adventures together, finding new friends along the way, and even inspiring a little girl in a wheelchair to walk again.
Oh,
That's amazing.
All you need is inspiration to walk again.
yeah.
The movie starred Hugh Hooker's young son, Buddy Lee Hooker, who was an actor himself that went by the name Buddy Hart at the time. Buddy Hart later changed his name back to Buddy Lee Hooker and followed in his father's footsteps as a very successful and sought-after stuntman and stunt coordinator.
So with the success of his first film as a producer, Hugh Hooker decided to make another film, this time in the horror genre. And remember, at this time in the 1950s, low-budget horror and sci-fi movies were cleaning up at theaters, and particularly drive-ins.
So Hugh Hooker, like other enterprising producers at the time, decided to take a crack at making a cheap, quickie horror flick.
Because the film was made independently, it did not have a distribution company attached. So when filming was complete, the movie had yet to find a distributor who could release it. Several months passed, and another wrinkle in the film's fate happened. A 1959 Los Angeles Times article reported that director Charles Rondeau's wife at the time, Marlis Rondeau, was suing him for divorce and was seeking interest in Devil's Partner as part of her divorce settlement.
Hell hath no fury.
What became of that lawsuit, we don't know, but we do know that the film continued to sit on the shelf unreleased through all of 1959. Then finally, in May of 1960, it was announced in the Hollywood trades that Roger Corman's new distribution company, Film Group, acquired the rights to release Devil's Partner.
Corman's Film Group also purchased another independent film at the time, a crime melodrama called The Girl in Lover's Lane. That film was made with much of the same crew as Devil's Partner. It was shot by the same director, Charles Rondeau, and featured the same editor, cinematographer, art director, and composer. So it's very possible that Film Group bought the release rights to both Devil's Partner and The Girl in Lover's Lane in the same distribution deal. But for whatever reason, Film Group still didn't end up releasing Devil's Partner until well into 1961, when it was put out as a double feature with Roger Corman's Creature from the Haunted Sea. The Los Angeles premiere was even later, in July of 1962.
Genre filmmaker Fred Olen Ray, no stranger to low-budget horror and sci-fi flicks, wrote a book on independent film distribution called The New Poverty Row. In the book, he speculates that Corman delayed the release of Creature from the Haunted Sea and its co-feature Devil's Partner because Creature was set in Puerto Rico, and Film Group was releasing two other films shot in Puerto Rico in 1960, The Last Woman on Earth and the war drama Battle of Blood Island. So perhaps Corman didn't want to inundate the market with so many Puerto Rico-based movies in the same year.
Ah, but even stranger. Around the time Film Group was acquiring Devil's Partner for America, the UK distribution company, Grand National Pictures, released the film in England in early 1960 on a double bill with another American film, Ed Wood's Plan 9 from Outer Space. The two movies played as a double feature in a handful of theaters across the UK.
Film Group was a company formed by Roger Corman and his producer brother Gene Corman. Roger had been making many films for American International Pictures, as well as other companies like Allied Artists and Warner Brothers. But Roger was always a savvy businessman and very ambitious. He wanted to take a stab at film distribution as well as film production so he could have more control of his films and have more freedom away from AIP. So with his brother Gene, Roger formed Film Group. Some of the genre movies Film Group produced were Beast from Haunted Cave, The Wasp Woman, The Little Shop of Horrors, Night Tide, Dementia 13, and Queen of Blood.
Film Group would also purchase independent films from other production companies and release them, Devil's Partner being one of those movies. But during all of this, Roger Corman was still directing and producing films for AIP, including the well-received and bigger-budgeted Edgar Allan Poe Vincent Price films. Because of this, he was starting to spread himself thin. Also, by the end of the 1950s, the black and white double features that were so popular at the start of the decade were now not as in vogue. More expensive solo releases in color were taking over. So eventually, Roger closed down Film Group. And in fact, the last few films under the Film Group banner ended up being distributed by AIP anyway when Film Group was shutting down.
Roger Corman himself was quoted as saying, and I'll try this in my best Roger Corman voice, "The Film Group made money every year, but we never made much money. I finally just let it drift away because I realized I could not produce, direct, and run a distribution company at the same time. It was too many things. My feelings at the time were that I wanted to produce and direct. So I let Film Group fade and went out of distribution, knowing I had been slightly successful at it."
Wow, it's like he was really in the room.
Hi, Mr. Corman. The trailer for Devil's Partner has some interesting narration and asks a lot of questions. Is he man or beast? Is he young or old? A town terrorized by an unknown killer, and the killer hunt is on. Is it the village belle or her sweetheart? Is it the beloved doctor or the town drunk? Could it be the accommodating waitress? Or the stranger? But whoever the stranger is, he's raising the devil in town. The devil's partner is busy too. Which I assume is the dog.
Right.
A blood-marked trail will take you into shocking terror. Half man, half beast, he sold his soul to the devil.
Well, Doc, how does it look?
I've seen worse is not the most comforting thing.
Right.
I've seen people with no heads at all. Consider yourself lucky.
Director Charles Rondeau was a very prolific director who started out doing low-budget feature films in the late 50s and early 60s, and then eventually worked almost exclusively in television. After serving in the U.S. Army, Rondeau's first directing job was for Hugh Hooker's The Littlest Hobo. Devil's Partner was their second film together. After wrapping on Devil's Partner, Rondeau shot The Girl in Lover's Lane in January of 1959, and as we mentioned, both films were picked up by Roger Corman's Film Group. Rondeau then turned to television. He directed all different genres of TV, from action shows to comedies, sci-fi series, and more. The TV shows he directed the most episodes for were Hawaiian Eye, F Troop, Room 222, and he became the go-to director for the ABC comedy anthology series Love American Style. He directed over 40 episodes of the show throughout its 5 seasons. Other TV shows Rondeau directed episodes for were The Munsters, Batman, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Wild Wild West, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Mission Impossible, Wonder Woman, and several episodes of the Sid and Marty Krofft Saturday morning show, Bigfoot and Wild Boy.
Nice.
Doesn't it look like the scar on David's face has actually gotten larger than when he was patched up, you know, with just those bandages?
It's infected. He doesn't look that bad. Like, yeah, he's got a big old scar, but, you know, when it heals, he'll look kind of, I don't know, maybe rugged. In fact, he's kind of Michael Crawford, Phantom of the Opera handsome now.
Right.
So when it's suggested to David that there are other surgeons he could employ, well, is Nick going to end up killing each and every one of them?
Right. Doesn't it seem like in the 50s, whether it was a TV show or a movie, everybody just had a handgun handy in the dresser drawer of every room?
Right? What's wrong with that? Okay, now the press book for Devil's Partner isn't the most creative you'll ever see. And this is a press book that is for Devil's Partner and Creature from the Haunted Sea. And it's standard. You get posters, ads, and so forth. What's kind of helpful is you get a sample copy of a blurb you can put in your local newspaper where all you have to do is just pop in the date and location of where the film is showing. So there's one piece that they have that's kind of funny where they're describing the film, and it says, The Devil's Partner, starring Ed Nelson, Gene Allison, and Edgar Buchanan, reveals the gripping physical and emotional terror that grips a town. That's 2 grips already. That's a lot of gripping. When a mysterious stranger decides to take up residence in horrible and frightening horrifying incidents start to occur. Wow, I'm gripped.
One interesting thing about the press book is when they give the synopsis of the film, they describe the ending of the movie very differently than what happens in the film. According to the synopsis in the press book, a priest is called in to minister to the dying man, and slowly the devil, who has been controlling the soul and actions of this man, is exorcised.
Priest?
Nope.
Oh.
So maybe that was something in an original draft of the script that got changed. I don't know.
Or maybe someone just got their information wrong.
Very possible.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of just like, I think that's what happens.
Yeah, I'm sure
nobody
a
cares.
priest shows up. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The main tagline for the film is inspired. Half man, half beast, he sold his soul for passion. It's interesting, but on the insert card for the film, the tagline's been changed slightly, reading, half man, half beast, he sold his soul for pleasure.
Very different. Very different.
Yeah.
Maybe pleasure was considered less salacious? Or maybe it's a misprint?
Yeah. Strange. And only on one piece of artwork.
I don't know if you noticed, but the sheriff is right-handed, but his gun is on his left side, which means he has to reach over his body to grab the gun to pull it out. I just thought that was...
That's a shooting hand.
I don't know.
I went over to see Nick this morning. I figured he might be able to straighten out this business about old Pete Jensen being rich. You know, that's what papers wrote, or at least...
The co-screenwriter for Devil's Partner has a very interesting bio. Now, this was Stanley Clements. At an early age, Clements wanted to be a performer, and after doing vaudeville for a couple of years, joined the Major Beau's Amateur Hour tour. Clements managed to snag a studio contract with 20th Century Fox and went on to star with Cesar Romero in the 1941 gangster comedy Tall, Dark, and Handsome.
Although Clements would appear in a few of the East Side Kids films, later renamed The Bowery Boys, Clements moved up the Hollywood ranks to appear in quite a few A-list productions. He was in the 1943 George Stevens film The More the Merrier, the 1944 Leo McCarey classic Going My Way, and played a wisecracking jockey in 1945's Sally O'Rourke.
From 1945 to 1946, Clements served in the U.S. Army, and it was during this time that he married every film buff's dream girl, Gloria Graham. Unfortunately, the marriage between Stanley and Gloria would not last. Clements appeared in a long list of films during the 40s and 50s, even getting lead roles in a number of low-budget films, including Johnny Holiday, Destination Murder, and the hockey drama White Lightning.
In 1951, Clements would marry again, this time walking down the aisle with Polish immigrant Maria Wallach. But it was in 1956 when Clements would get a chance to revisit his East Side Kid days, playing a part in the final films of the Bowery Boys.
For the last 7 films, Leo Gorcey's role as leader of the gang would be replaced by Stanley Clements as Duke. But although Clements had experience acting in those previous East Side Kids films, he unfortunately was never able to replicate the chemistry Leo Gorcey had with Hans Hall.
Clements would continue to act in films like the 1963 comedy classic It's a Mad, 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 Mad World and 1978's Hot Lead and Cold Feet. But most of his performances were done for television. He appeared in a number of classic shows, including Gunsmoke, 77 Sunset Strip, The Untouchables, Gomer Pyle, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., Get Smart, Lassie, Beretta, and Policewoman. Sadly, on October 16, 1981, at the age of 55, Stanley Clements died from emphysema just 11 days after the death of his first wife, Gloria Graham.
Now, we don't know exactly how Clements ended up writing the screenplay for Devil's Partner, but I think it's a really strong script for a first-time writing job, and it's a shame that Clements didn't go on to write more films, or more horror films, too.
Sure. Speaking of the writing, Stanley Clements' screenwriting partner is credited as Laura Jean Matthews. But after scouring the internet, it looks like this is her only film credit. And let's face it, showbiz is a tough gig, And maybe after having to sit in a tiny office, writing a screenplay with Stanley Clements and hearing about Gloria Graham and how he was funnier than Leo Gorcey, she got fed up and said, "That's it, I'm done. I'm going to the Amazon to teach creative writing." Now, I'm not saying this happened, but what I'm saying is I wouldn't blame her if it did happen. So if any of you out there know Laura Jean, tell her we'd love to hear her story.
The cinematography is by Edward Kronjaeger. He was likely the most experienced crew member working on Devil's Partner. Kronjaeger had been in the business for over 40 years with over 130 credits to his name and several Academy Award nominations. He had great genes as he came from a family of Hollywood cinematographers. His dad, uncle, and brother all worked behind the camera, so Edward was literally following in their footsteps. From an early age, Kronjaeger had a great understanding of composition and style, and he enjoyed experimenting. Over the course of his career, which started in the late 1920s, Kronjaeger shot silents, early talkies in the 30s, early color films. He worked with Technicolor, CinemaScope, and shot for TV. He was widely respected amongst his peers, and he served on several Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences committees. He was also selected by the American Society of Cinematographers to test out the latest film stocks of the day. He had an amazing career, starting out at RKO, then moving to 20th Century Fox, before switching to a freelance cinematographer. He shot just about every type of genre, from sports, big westerns, comedies, drama, film noir, underwater films, horror, and one sci-fi TV series. Some of those horror genre films include The Monkey's Paw, Lightning Strikes Twice, and the 1939 horror comedy The Gorilla with the Ritz brothers, Lionel Atwill, and Bela Lugosi.
Kronjaeger was actually nominated 7 times for Best Cinematographer for the Academy Awards. However, he did not win. Those nominations were for Cimarron, Sun Valley Serenade, To the Shores of Tripoli, The Pied Piper, Heaven Can Wait, Home in Indiana, and Beneath the 12-Mile Reef.
Kronjaeger did have a little controversy in his early career. By the late 1920s, much of the film industry was unionized, and since Kronjaeger was consistently working, he resisted joining the cinematography union. But while preparing to film Moran of the Marines with Richard Dix in 1928, unions threatened to strike if he was hired. So, in order to prevent the film from being shut down, the studio begged him to join the union, which he did reluctantly. By the mid-1950s, Kronjaeger's health wasn't the greatest, and the work began to dry up. By 1958, most of the stuff he was working on was either low budget or in television. Tragically, sometime late in the decade, he accidentally became injured while trying to break up a fight between a couple of stuntmen. This injury added to his overall declining health. After shooting Devil's Partner back in 1958, director Charles Rondeau had Kronjaeger shoot his crime drama The Threat in 1960, which was his last film. Edward Kronjaeger died at the age of 56 in June 1960, before the release of Devil's Partner. Although he died young, Kronjaeger left an amazing body of work which is still admired to this day by industry professionals.
The art director and production designer for Devil's Partner was Daniel Haller. He worked as an art director on a ton of beloved genre films from the 50s and 60s, including A Bucket of Blood, The Little Shop of Horrors, Attack of the Giant Leeches, and Master of the World with Vincent Price.
If, like us, you're a fan of Roger Corman's Edgar Allan Poe series, Daniel Haller had a lot to do with making those films so visually stunning.
Yeah.
Haller did production design and art direction for all of them. These films included House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, The Raven, The Haunted Palace, although that's really a Lovecraft film, and arguably the best one, The Mask of the Red Death. These films showcase Haller's talent for creating a spooky Gothic environment that brought those Poe stories to life.
Haller eventually got the chance to direct his first feature, 1965's Die Monster Die, starring Boris Karloff and the always enjoyable Nick Adams. Die Monster Die is a personal favorite of mine because I'm a huge fan of the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and the film is based, although very loosely, on his story The Color Out of Space. Die Monster Die is far from a perfect film, but it does a great job with atmosphere, and when it goes off the rails, it's delightfully bonkers. In the late 60s, Haller took a thematic departure to direct the biker film Devil's Angels and the race car flick The Wild Racers. But The Call of Cthulhu and Company would ultimately be too strong. In 1970, Haller returned to his Lovecraft roots to direct The Dunwich Horror, starring Dean Stockwell and Sandra Dee.
The editor on Devil's Partner was Howard Epstein. Epstein worked with several other editors on bigger films like Oklahoma and Around the World in 80 Days. And then Epstein's first solo editing job was for director Charles Rondeau's The Littlest Hobo. After that, Rondeau had Epstein edit The Devil's Partner in 1958. And then in 1960, Epstein edited two of Rondeau's crime dramas, The Threat and The Girl in Lover's Lane. After that, the pair never worked together again. Epstein actually edited another devil-themed film called The Devil's Hand in 1961. That film is a bit different, as the main character unknowingly falls for a woman who's involved in a satanic cult. And as the 60s continued, Epstein made a name for himself in television, editing for a variety of TV series such as M Squad, Riverboat, Checkmate, and Boris Karloff's Thriller. Epstein would later be nominated for an Emmy Award for his editing on the acclaimed series Alcoa Premiere, starring Fred Astaire. In the 1970s, he would edit an episode of Rod Serling's Night Gallery, as well as episodes of Emergency, Ironside, Ellery Queen, and The $6 Million Man. Towards the end of his career in the 1980s, Howard Epstein found himself extremely busy editing 18 episodes over 5 seasons of The Dukes of Hazzard. Epstein died in 2006 at the ripe old age of 99.
The makeup in this film was done by Louis Hazzillo, and with an extremely limited budget, Hazzillo does a pretty nice job at aging Ed Nelson as old man Pete Jensen and David's facial scar. As for the rest of the film, Hazzillo just had to make sure that people looked sweaty.
Yeah.
Did a very good job with that.
Yeah, he did.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Hazzillo started working professionally as a makeup man in the mid-1950s and worked on mostly low to medium-sized budget films like The Fast and the Furious, the 1954 version written by Roger Corman, and Hot Rod Girl, and Monster from Green Hell. Probably the most famous or infamous film that he ever did makeup for was the 1955 cult classic by Ed Wood, Bride of the Monster, originally titled Bride of the Atom.
From the late 1950s to the end of the 1960s, Hazzillo did a lot of television work and worked as a regular makeup artist on various TV shows like Union Pacific, The Untouchables, My Favorite Martian, and the TV series Shane. After Devil's Partner, Hazzillo did makeup on Charles Rondeau's crime drama The Girl in Lover's Lane. The last film Hazzillo did makeup for was for the low-budget Western from Paramount called Buckskin in 1968, starring Barry Sullivan, Joan Caulfield, and Lon Chaney Jr. Hazzillo passed away in May of 1973.
This is a nice, nuanced scene.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because earlier Nick could not look at Nell's cross, but it looks, to me, it's like as if he's trying to redeem himself, trying to accept the cross, but he can't quite do it.
Like receiving his last rites.
Yeah, but it doesn't quite work.
And they're taking their time with it.
Yeah.
So when he finally does that reach for it, it makes it all the more dramatic.
And also you have the line from Doc where he says that Nick's trying to make peace with his maker.
Yeah. Horse is a corpse, of course. Overall, I think the makers of this film did a lot with very little.
Absolutely.
Every performance is good, and that's something you don't always see in a low-budget horror film. Though, I think I could have used just a few more scares.
Yeah.
I think it would have been nice to see Ed Nelson turn into a more frightening animal, like a bear or a mountain lion.
Panther or something.
Yeah, right.
Gorilla.
See, something that would stick out, that wouldn't belong there.
And no one would believe him.
Right,
You know,
yes.
say, I saw a gorilla.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, these are rhino tracks.
Right.
We hope you enjoyed the Monster Party Blu-ray commentary for Devil's Partner. I'm Matt Weinhold.
I'm Shawn Sheridan.
I'm Larry Strothe.
And I'm James Gonis.
And if anyone offers you a glass of goat's milk, just walk away.